This is a Culture Inject production.
So welcome back to The Nevers Podcast, a fan cast for Joss Whedon's HBO series The Nevers. On today's show, we'll be discussing episode 4 of The Nevers titled Undertaking. I won't be reviewing this episode alone. Joining me to dissect this episode today is my co-host Chirag. So hello.
Hello. So a bit about The Nevers Podcast. If you'd like to follow us online, visit our website at hbothenevers.com. On Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at HBO The Nevers and at HBO The Nevers Podcast without an A.
You can stream The Nevers Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Amazon Podcasts, YouTube, and anywhere else that you can stream podcasts. Comments, questions, and interview requests, please send them to theneverspodcast@gmail.com. And please also rate and review our podcasts and help us reach more listeners.
So for a little bit of housekeeping, we were fortunate to receive episodes 1 through 4 of The Nevers from HBO, which allowed us to see into the future and record our review for those episodes ahead of time and have them ready to publish the day after the episode aired on television. But now we'll be watching the episodes with the rest of you as they air, which means that our reviews will be published on a new date. We will keep you informed. Follow us on our social media accounts to stay updated.
So, synopsis of, we've got episode 4, Undertaking, which aired May 2nd, 2021. So while Mundy seeks justice, Amalia and her most trusted advisors make a list of potential enemies. Harriet, Primrose, and the other orphans attempt to decipher a message. Later, Amalia exposes an unexpected threat. Got all the usual players. We're introducing Vinnie Heaven as Nimble. It's written by Madhuri Shakar and directed by David Semel.
Okay, so what are your initial impressions? What did you like about this?
I really liked this episode. It was very different to the other episodes. A lot less action and a lot more information and kind of delving into what's actually going on, which I really enjoyed. So yeah, it was a lot more kind of drama and just kind of character based, lots smaller interactions. Yeah, it seems like everything's kind of coming together here and we're getting closer to what's actually going on. I also liked that it focused more on the other characters, so with Myrtle and Harriet and Primrose, you know, trying to figure out and decipher what Mary's song was, just kind of all of that in the orphanage, which was just a little bit different, so I liked that.
Yeah, that was nice. Yeah, well, first of all, I wanted to preface talking about anything with an apology for the last week's audio. I got a new mic, so hopefully this should be audible and not shatter your eardrums with plosives. So I liked this episode too. I didn't like it as much as I liked the previous 3. It was less narratively dense and complex as the last few were. We do go back into the territory of Amalia is not a good leader of the orphanage. Lucy says that she doesn't really know what the orphans are going through because she never gets close to them. But it turns out Amalia kind of does know what the orphans are going through, as we find out that she was left behind or orphaned by the magic UFO people. And speaking of that, speaking of Amalia True, I mean, I feel like it's more like Amalia False, because I think I radically misinterpreted her character. I thought when she said that she isn't from here, she was referring to Ireland or something, but I guess it turns out she was referring to another galaxy. I think I got very attached to the mystery of it. The ineffable, unsolvable, the question, and now that the question is kind of being answered, it feels a little less profound, but a lot more sci-fi. And I wonder if this is another case of, like, with Firefly, for example, it was bringing science fiction into the Western, so this is kind of like bringing science fiction into the period piece. It'll be interesting to see a spaceship in Victorian times. Okay, so you wanna jump into discussing the start of this episode?
Yeah, so the episode opens with everyone except Amalia attending Mary's funeral. Purists interrupt the service and begin hassling the attendees, mostly the touched. While at the service, Detective Mundy also inquires about Amalia's whereabouts because, why isn't she there?
I was going to ask you a question, Laura. Do we know who the purists are, and do we know what exactly their agenda is?
No, I would assume they're some kind of gathering who just don't like the touched. So I would imagine that in the future, Massen in particular will probably be able to use them to radicalize them and use them in part of his army as such to kind of, I don't know, just make the whole country not like the touched. But I think we're much with Hugo later says, who who are the purists? He's got no idea what he's talking about. So they're obviously a new kind of group that have come about.
I guess that if they're the purists, then maybe the touched are the impure. Maybe it's like a Harry Potter mudblood kind of thing.
I feel like it's going to be a lot of people, much like the woman that they got from Lavinia's underground workings, who was luring the people in, who just sees them as that. They're not really people. They're abominations or whatever as such.
I did want to mention before we leave that scene, the intercutting between the pallbearers who are lowering the casket and the workers on the dock who are lowering the bomb crates. The only meaning that I could, when I was watching that I extracted from that was maybe it was trying to say that these bombs represent many caskets that are being lowered because, bombs are designed for death. And in a sense, when Mary Brighton was a casualty of war, there will be many people who suffer the same fate as a result of the bombs. So maybe that was a little anti-war subliminal commentary.
Yeah, it was really nice how they did that, the duality of that scene. So we learn that Amalia's not there because she's, at the pub in this bar brawl, which I guess is, that's how she grieves, that's how she deals with a situation, that she's not, that was out of her hands, and after, I don't know, having a failure, she's got to go and have a good slap because, that famous Amalia slap is probably my favourite thing about this show.
Let it out. It's kind of like a romanticized bar fight scene, the trouble caused by a reckless hero, which we've seen 100 times, right? It's archetypically masculine, so we usually see a dude who gets into a bar fight. I think Star Trek, the 2009 one, starts with Kirk in a bar fight, but flipping it to a female kind of makes an old thing new. So it felt more fresh than it would have
definitely
otherwise.
And then we learn, obviously, much later, during the alleyway scene with Bonfire, that the fiddle player is one of the Beggar King's men. Yeah. So she wasn't just there for a bar fight, she was also there to get information. So, she was working, but she was also kind of just letting all of her anger go, I think, at the same time. And then you've got the funny little line in the office when she's like, how much does a violin cost? Because she just wrecked one. And then we see... I liked this scene as well. So Lord Massen goes to the factories where they've just kind of had a little strike, right? And my takeaway from this scene was he's so domineering and scary. You think there's all these men and he enters the scene and they're just silent and stood there, shook. They're he is in charge. He says to band together when you can stand alone. Why would someone do that? Which is a complete opposite of the touched, right? Because they're all coming together to be this group where they can care about each other and essentially be stronger together. Whereas Massen's view is, why would you do that when you could be your own person and stand alone? So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, hitting them where it hurts. It was very Dickensian, that scene. He Scrooged those guys. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And it's like Benjamin Franklin's cartoon, United we stand, divided we fall. Basically the opposite of a union-busting anthem. And, it goes back to the pilot where Massen wanted to preserve the Anglo-Saxon term employed as opposed to the more romantic employee, so that power doesn't have to contend with individual rights, and nor does it have to deal with collective bargaining. And moving on to the next scene, we have Annie Bonfire questioning Horatio about Amalia's absence from the funeral and her seeming lack of leadership, and Amalia overhears them talking about her. So I think we covered this ground in the last episode, that, maybe Amalia isn't the best leader with all of her faults.
Yeah, I mean, I think he covers that just because that might be her way of dealing with something, or the way that she does it, you can't be perfect, right? And B, like, for me at least, I still feel like she's a really strong lead, even though she's got all these faults. Yeah, because I think, on the other hand, you can have someone who's seemingly perfect, but you're always going to be thinking that there's something going on in the background, which is kind of, I guess, Lavinia's scene going on. You think she's helping everybody, but really deep down, she's actually kind of, we suspect, really evil. So, it's funny how you can judge someone based on their actions or what they've done and that, but they might not necessarily... I don't necessarily think she's a super bad leader. She's just a bit dysfunctional, but,
Yeah, no one's perfect.
No one's perfect.
In the same scene, we learn that the papers are blaming Malady for Mary's death. And Amalia has a vision of herself in Lord Massen's office. And we see later in that scene Amalia to say to Penance, "I was left here completely alone, with nothing but a mission I was never actually given. No orders, no objectives. They left here and fucked right off. Maybe they died, who cares? I'm here where a woman can be killed just for having a voice." So who do you think they are? Who left her? Who do you think... What do you think about that scene?
I think for me the most important... Well, the one that stands out for me in that scene is just before she starts saying that I was left here completely alone. She's talking about funerals, and Penance is like, "Oh, I can imagine you've been to a lot." And Amalia says, "None. We don't do that when I'm from." And originally when I watched it, I thought she said, "We don't do that where I'm from." But on rewatching it, like that little bit, I'm almost certain she says when. So now I'm like, we don't do that when I'm from. We don't have enough time, and we don't have enough ground. So yeah, that's my main question now, because now I'm like, okay, not only do I think that she's like from some alien race, but is she from another time? Why would she say when?
Yeah.
We don't do that when I'm from.
I didn't notice that. I thought she said where I'm from. It could be that she's from the future.
It's possible. Someone said that, didn't they? One of the fan theories was that she's from the future, or that the ship is sent from the future from Penance, the future Penance. And she goes on to say, a woman could be killed just for having a voice, which will be the world's epitaph if I can't do something other than make it worse. So she's clearly still really upset that she hasn't really helped yet, right? All she's kind of done is fumble her way through, get people killed. And she wants to help, but again, she's been put here with a mission, or not even a mission, and she has no idea really what she's meant to do.
And then I think sci-fi fantasy has always been a really good vehicle to investigate and explore concepts like misogyny, because for us as people who live on Earth and walk on the ground, sexism is so common and so woven into the fabric of our cultures that we don't even look twice. But to an alien or to someone out of this time, that shit would be wild.
Yeah.
Like today, when we hear about some of the crazy customs and traditions of our ancient ancestors, we have the same reaction. Like, what are you doing? Why are you terrorizing the other half of your own race? And then I really liked the line they ended it with, and it'll be the world's fucking epitaph. I thought that was a cool little line.
An epitaph is so the last episode of Dollhouse season 1 and the last episode of Dollhouse Season 2 are called epitaphs, so epitaph 1 and 2, so that's like a little...
Which is an engraving on a tombstone. Speaking of not having funerals. So we get the first hint of suspicion from Amalia, who thinks that one of the Touched are behind Mary's death. And then we have the scene where Myrtle confides in Primrose that Mary's song was a message that she could understand. So you called it in the last episode.
Yeah, it really hit me when the song's going and everybody's just like totally immersed and Myrtle's standing there with this like look of shock on her face. Like, and that was me, like she must understand it. So I got exactly what I wanted from this episode. I was like, oh great. Because to start with, there's like a lot that's happened already and I'm thinking, where's Myrtle? Is someone going to speak to, like, surely Myrtle would have gone straight to like Amalia or someone, right? But no, she's like on her own struggling, trying to figure out herself kind of, and one of the only ways she can kind of do that is with her drawings. Primrose comes in and she's then really upset because she can't understand Myrtle and, you know, she wants to be a friend and they're like getting on really well, but it's got to be really difficult to not understand what someone is saying, right? So, but she starts helping and I'm like really excited because I'm thinking we're going to find out, you know, they're going to go and hunt down some translators or whatever and we're going to find out. So yeah, I really enjoyed that.
I liked her drawing on the paper. It reminded me of Hush, that Buffy episode. You're trying to say something and nobody can understand you.
Yeah, no one can hear. It's also a little bit, I guess, from what we saw of Mary's song was really kind of like airy and bright and the drawings were a lot darker. Which was a bit, is this something scary? We're going to find out.
So then we have a new character named Effie Boyle from The Sentinel, who goes to the police headquarters to find out what the detective knows about Mary's shooting. She believes there's something larger at play, and Mundy says that it's one of the Touched who kills Mary. So what do you think? I like the idea of Lois Lane in Victorian times. That would be something I'd very much like to watch.
I think it's interesting to see another body that is really invested in the Touched. And she seems, you know, she wants to discover everything about them and not be biased. And I guess she keeps running into people that are like either or, you know. All the elites like are not really liking the Touched. The police are not really sure whether they're bad or good. And like when you have someone like Mundy just saying, you know, I think one of the Touched did it. Why? Why are we just jumping to this conclusion, you know? Have you got any evidence? It's like, no. Why? But so it's nice to have another angle and see if that will continue.
And I wonder if she'll be the one to write the expose on Lavinia. Maybe it'll be like a Jacques Hughes kind of thing or something.
So then Mundy and his partner interview the purists who interrupted Mary's service. They disclosed that a couple of guys in suits approached them at a purist meeting and gave them a card, one resembling Hugo Swan's, and they suggested they call out the decent folk at the funeral. So, straight away, obviously, Mundy sees this card, and obviously he's already got bad business with Swan, so he just leaps to this conclusion. It must be him. I think that was an interesting scene. It was nice to see, you know, just the setup with him rolling up his sleeves. And they're like, yeah, of course, come on then, let's go. They're like, and then they find out he's the ape and just totally back down. Like, that's how scary Frank Mundy was in his heyday, I guess.
Yeah, he's a famous boxer. We're discovering new layers to each of these characters every episode. It's good to see.
So then we have Amalia, Penance, Lucy and the gang gathered to narrow down suspects responsible for Mary's killing. I like there's the bit where Lucy's kind of like on the landing on the balcony and you can kind of see she's looking over everybody running around, which obviously later we learn really is she just watching, she's scared, right? She's really worried because she's going to get found out. But when you're seeing it for the first time, you don't see any of this. And that's what I like about little, once you know and you can watch a show back and you see everything and you're like, So there's a lot of these and I'll list them all at the end because I really enjoyed this. But
and Lucy is another case of, like Lavinia, of a character being loudly virtuous but quietly duplicitous.
Yeah, There's all the accounts. Like I say, I kind of pick up on them throughout. I'll pick up on all the little Lucy telltale signs.
Yeah. The rousing political speech against Lord Massen.
Yeah, she's so into it, isn't she? And she obviously messes up. She talks about his hunting and his trophies, and Amalia's already seen it once in a little flash forward, but she obviously goes there later on. Mundy confronts Swan about his involvement in Mary's death, but Hugo denies any involvement. So this scene was great. He just barges his way in, right? They're there playing chess, or cheese, as we find out. Which is funny because you think all these high ups and how much power they must have, right? And how much important work they should have to do. And here they all are at this men's club playing chess with cheese. That in itself is just like hard hitting facts about society. What's more important than all these people dying and all the touch and it, like the war? Well, cheese.
Especially like the way he barges in, it really makes you understand how little he gives a fuck about all this now. It's kind of like, and he even says at the end, I don't care anymore. I have that over you. He lost all semblance of civility. Civil discourse is out the window.
I like seeing how sincerely disheartened Hugo is that Frank Mundy actually thought it was him. Because clearly they've had some connection and they've had some relations, and for whatever, they each think has gone on and how they want to look at their relationship or whatever, Hugo clearly cares about Mundy, and yeah, you can see that he's really upset that he would think that he'd be capable of a murder against someone that was important to Frank Mundy. He says, she was a rival, and Hugo says, I think we both know she wasn't.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point. I think their relationship is really interesting, and the fact that Frank Mundy really hates Hugo Swan is kind of like a self-hatred almost. He hates the aspect of himself that would love Hugo. And as we know, they had an intimate relationship. So they did, presumably, make love several times. The first of which he was drunk for, and the rest of them for which he wasn't. So, interesting relationship.
And then he warns Mundy about Amalia. So, you've got all this thing, he's saying, oh, it's you. And now Hugo's saying, well, maybe you should look at Amalia. And it's just this whole web of mess at the minute. We don't know who to blame. Lots and lots of people knew all the information, and it could have been anyone kind of thing at this point. I didn't mention back when they were all talking, Amalia and the others, about who it might be. There's another bit. So Amalia says that she's going to go see Massen, and Lucy straight away is like, are you sure? Are you sure? Which you would think is just because it's about her safety and whatever, she's worried about her. But we'll learn that it's not. So Harriet is enlisting the help of her fiancé to find translators that can help translate what Myrtle has learned about the song that Mary was singing. So again, this is exciting for me because they're going to find out, right? They're going to discover what the song was. And also, again, like I said at the very beginning, something that I like about this episode is that we're getting to see Harriet and Primrose and Myrtle with more of a presence. We've kind of been more focused on the older people at the orphanage and obviously Amalia and Penance. So it's nice to see the younger ones kind of take lead on something and really prove their worth as well.
They earn their stripes.
Yeah. So then we see Penance visit Augustus to question him about Mary Shooter. And yeah, I really enjoyed that scene. That just goes from one extreme to the other. It's kind of like, first of all, he's got no idea. Well, he thinks she's talking about the party and what he did. So he apologises. Yeah, it was, I did something really bad. Well, what are you talking about? And then you've got the whole little recorder under her dress, which, like some of her inventions that are kind of prototypes, fails. Yeah, and they end up reconciling. Yeah, I just think they're so cute.
Of course they're going to end up together. The quirky kids are always going to end up together. That's how it goes in these shows. I was a little more invested in the Amalia Penance relationship. I was hoping that would be consummated and there would be a little something more romantic there, but I guess it's platonic now that we have Augustus making moves.
Sealing Penance away. Yeah, I think that Amalia and Penance are more like just, really best friends, yeah, and like sisters almost. They are just like as close can be. Their love is pure. They are the bestest of friends. They're the kind of ones, I don't mind the kind of like will they, won't they in TV shows, but I also really can't stand it when it's like really obvious and really kind of like that's the end goal of the TV show is that this couple's going to end up together. I feel like you just end up being played along, right? So I quite like relationships where there's no question. You're not ever bothered if people are going to end up together or not. It's not like the main thing of the show, but it's nice that it's there.
You know what I just realized? I just realized that the Penance Amalia relationship is frozen. It's like Amalia, she's like the icy, emotionally distant kind of queen of the castle, and then you have the little sister who's a little more jovial, and their love is pure.
I like at the very end of their scene when, she's just like, would you think your sister did the murder then? And he gives this first lot, that like the first instinctual look is, of course not, that's absurd. And then this second little glance of, maybe, is that possible? That could definitely possibly be her. For her own brother to give that look of, hang on a minute, could she have done this? That is very, very worrying. And also the first sentence that he says in their meeting is, does Lavinia know you're here? So he's already like, he's so scared of her. Obviously she's warned him about Penance. But yeah, it's, very, very, very clear. And another little line that I enjoyed was, nobody is as barbaric as the well-to-do. And he's in that, so for somebody that is in that part of society to say that, but I do think that this is, like you said, we want them to end up together and that'll happen. I think that look at the end is, if Lavinia really is evil and he finds that out, I do think that he will leave her in a heartbeat and not really think about it. He will go to the people at the orphanage and kind of join their side and be with Penance over his sister. No problem, yeah. I think that'll be interesting to see if that develops. So then, after that scene, we meet Nimble. So Annie meets Nimble, who works for the Beggar King. Nimble assures Annie that Mary's death was not at the hands of the Beggar King. Do you like our new character?
Yeah, Nimble is definitely an interesting character, with very, very smooth and coxswain. There's a little bit of chemistry between Nimble and Annie.
Yeah.
And apparently can create some kind of reflective shield to not only block fire attacks, but also to use as a stepladder in space, which is visually dynamic. It's cool to see.
Yeah.
And I feel like morally ambiguous, but not malevolent. So the fact that Nimble works for the Beggar King, I'm wondering what their relationship is, because Nimble says, I don't work for, I work with the Beggar King.
Yeah.
Which presumably means that they don't have loyalty to the Beggar King.
Yeah, much like Annie.
I like...
much like Annie didn't have like a sense of loyalty for with Malady. They're their own people working at the end of the day. But yeah, I liked Nimble. It was a nice little interaction, and I'm just finding myself trying to decipher all this talk now. There's so much talk about all these people and everything that's going on in the background, and yeah, it only escalates through this episode to leave you with all these questions of like, who's working with who and what's happening. But yeah, hopefully it will all become clearer.
Yeah, so many alliances, frayed alliances, and enemies, and plots, and all sorts of stuff. And what I was thinking of earlier when I was referring to the Lois Lane journalist was like the Jacques thing, which I think is going to, if I had to predict, I think that's going to be an upcoming plot point, kind of galvanizing the public against these figures.
Yeah.
But we'll see if my last prediction didn't come true, so I don't know what I'm talking about.
We see Amalia visit Lord Massen in the next scene, and he suggests that whoever is responsible did it so those at the orphanage would lose hope. And he basically confesses without confessing, nor does he give up his source, who we later learn is Lucy. So what did you think about that scene?
I really enjoyed it. So when I watched it, my first thing was that what Massen was saying seems really genuine. He's just like straight up, and it seemed genuine, denying his part in the murder. And then they get into that whole role play, and he's so convincing. It's almost like that is the real him, and because he's in this role play, he can say exactly what has gone on, exactly what he's thinking, without actually confessing. So then you're like, oh man. Yeah, he's again the same as the scene at the beginning with the workers. He's the kind of guy, he's super scary, but never needs to raise his voice, never needs to really get angry, but it's just that like stone coldness of him. And yeah, it's pretty scary.
Yeah, he's very intimidating. He reiterates that he's at war with Touched, and him representing the British Empire, and the Touched representing any kind of meaningful or radical change or transformation. And just the way he refers to the Touched event, and I'm paraphrasing, but I think he refers to it as a molestation of God's nature and rules, like using this language couched in anger and hatred and fear, just like it's vandalizing something beautiful, like graffitiing on an art piece. And but I don't think he's responsible for Mary Brighton's death. I think that would be a little on the nose. My prediction is that still Lavinia is the mastermind behind that crime.
Yeah, I'm actually with you, and I was going to mention that at the end because, like I say, when I watched it, I did think that he was genuinely convincing that he didn't do it. But in the role play, he's so convincing that he has that mindset, at least, right? For me, it's hard because, like I said, so many people have this information. And one of the moments from the second episode, Amalia tells Lavinia that they're at the park. So from then, I'm thinking, well, it must have been Lavinia, okay, because they knew that they were there. So then I'm like questioning, are all these people working together? We don't know, do we? We still don't know. We're in the dark. Like I said, this big old web of different gangs and factions that might all be working separately, or...
Yeah, we do know that someone tried to frame Hugo Swan with that card, and Lavinia obviously would love to frame him because I think that's the Cold War between them in the show, but we also know that Lord Massen wouldn't mind framing him from the conversation they had about his father and that threat. So it really could be anybody. Despite him denying it, Amalia is convinced that Massen is the one who gave the order to have Mary killed, so the gang decide to torch his ammunition warehouse to send him a message. After that scene, we see Malady at the precinct threatening to kill the superintendent if they don't stop placing the blame on her for Mary's death, and then she jumps out the window. The detective Frank Mundy chases her and catches her, and the sound effects, I have to mention, when he's bashing her head against the wall are like crazy. Those like ridiculously violent. I feel like they smashed a coconut or something and recorded that. There's definitely some brain damage after that.
If there wasn't some before.
If there wasn't already. I was about to say.
Yeah, I like, first of all, her when she's in the window. I like how she was almost kind to Mundy. She gave him this like insight of like things that Mary had said when she was with her. She says something on the lines of like Mary knew, she described him as like being sad, and she knew he was sad. She didn't want to hurt him, essentially. Which I guess for him, you know, I know he'd spoken with Mary already, but to know that she hadn't just said that to his face, but she said that to someone else, that's how she felt about him, is really nice. Then you've got the craziness of the petals, and, you know, she was in the coffin, or she was in the box, she says. That is, to think that they're all there at this funeral and Malady was there too. Then another great bit is Mundy jumping out the window and doing the famous Assassin's Creed fall onto the cart, but makes it obviously look real life painful as opposed to in Assassin's Creed when it's totally fine and you can jump from buildings way high and not get harmed. So I don't know if that was their intention or they were like, well, we can't have him jump onto concrete, we're going to have to put something there. But I just thought Assassin's Creed and it made me laugh. Yeah, I like that it's like a little concise fight. Because so far we've seen kind of quite prolonged fights between her and Amalia. And this was, you can tell he's angry. Like you say, he smashes her head against the wall with such anger and force. But when another cop goes at her with a knife, he's like, no, she needs justice. We're going to give her justice. This is what we do. So it's nice to see, like in the first episode, he wants to do it the right way. So Amalia, Lucy and Annie go to Lord Massen's factory. As soon as they're in the factory, she's squirming, right? You can see it. You can see Lucy. She's not comfortable there. She wants to get the job done and get out because she knows that it's not right. And Amalia is so sarcastically cool. She breaks the box open. Well, no wonder we're not winning the war, because it's just rocks. And Lucy's still on the floor trying to slime her way out of it and think of something to say. Or, maybe he's moved it and blah, blah, blah. Then she sees Amalia's face and is like, I'm screwed. No, she knows. Then you see, for me, it's broken down into parts. So you see how upset Amalia is. And she gives her little spiel about how heartbroken she is because Lucy was the first woman. Okay, so the first woman that, was taken in, someone strong enough that Amalia could depend on. Yeah, not just someone that she saved and had to protect like everybody else at the orphanage. This is someone strong enough that she doesn't necessarily have to worry and someone that can help her as well as she helped them. Then you have Lucy telling us more about her losing her son and how obviously horrific that was, and that Massen promised, or at least told her, that they would try and find a cure. So she's thinking, she could get some kind of normal life back, and that's what she wants. She even asks if it was Amalia that did this. So yeah, it's so crazy to see. It's that thing of are they a villain as such? Or, everybody can be pushed to a certain place, right? Everybody's got those buttons.
I don't think she's a villain. I think she sees her condition as an affliction, as a curse, and how can she not after losing her child the way she did? And I just noticed, I just had the revelation while you were talking there, that when Amalia was saying to Lucy that you were the first woman I could depend on instead of having to protect, it was almost like she was asking Lucy to be the mother figure that Lucy just couldn't be after what happened to her own child. And it also ties in thematically with Amalia feeling like an orphan herself, feeling left behind by her people. And then, as far as the cure that Massen offered Lucy, it reminds me of the cure in Astonishing X-Men. And I guess Rogue would kind of mirror Lucy with not being able to touch anyone and the kind of social isolation of that.
Yeah, I was going to also say about X-Men, because it is obviously, with the cure and everything, because there are always going to be people. And like we said a couple of episodes ago, there are certain turns that, you can hide in society and no one will know that you have anything different with you. But some people, they can't hide amongst regular humans, and they have really horrific things that have happened to them because of that. And we don't know, obviously, what that would feel like. But I would imagine a lot of them, like Lucy said, would want an easy way out if they could. Would they still band together with the Touched if they had a way out? Probably a lot of them would. And then obviously you have the whole fight. The fight was cool. It's nice to see her ability breaking everything up. You're really worried when they're right close having the fist fight, because she's trying to block her arms so that she can't touch her. And then she really gives Lucy a beating. Like, her face after that fight is no good, and she's stumbling away, but she returns for that brooch. So, again, you see that she's obviously cares about these people, because that brooch Penance made her, and it represents, obviously, her mother. Yeah, it's, obviously, Amalia lets her go. Could have just killed her right then and there. And that she says that, doesn't she, later on? She says that, you know, I would have killed her if it wasn't for that bloody pin that you made. Then you get this nice little sit down at the end. Obviously, Myrtle and that have been translating the song, so they do it eventually come in and talk about what that is. Yeah, did we? So it does also show, we do see Malady in prison.
Well, maybe she can hang out with Lord Massen's daughter in that jail cell.
Is that what you think?
I think so. After the comment, I think that we're going to read later.
Yeah, I was going to say, we'll discuss it later, yeah. So, okay, so the end of the episode, like I said, they're sitting having this kind of little chat that Penance and Amalia always end up just kind of chilling at the end of the night, resting on each other, being the best pals that they are. And Harriet and Myrtle and that come in. They say that it wasn't Mary singing, you know, they're not her words, but it was someone else talking through her, and she says what it was. So, you are not alone, Amalia, my lonely soldier. Immediately, Amalia is kind of breaking down, right? So, this is hard-hitting stuff. Something about wearing stripes. I didn't leave you. I went inside the city. I was damaged, incomplete. I had to heal. So I immediately start thinking about the blue ball of light underground that Lavinia's experimenting on, because we know that it wasn't lit up. And then recently, I thought maybe because of the song, the ball kind of came back to light, but it could just be that it had to heal over, like you said, I think, had to heal over a period of time. Soon we will all be ready, but it's dark. There's a darkness. She said to everyone, all of us, to gather and protect each other because of the dark. Find me, let them help those who will, but come below and find me. Come before the dark, and we can save. And then obviously it was cut off because Mary was shot. So what are they trying to save? Who are they? That they need to gather? Yeah, it's just kind of... And again, because she's so distraught and upset, you know that she knows where this is coming from. She knows who it is. And there's the little comment. The main thing for me was Penance says, that's right. Like, she knows Amalia's truth now. After Amalia got shot and Penance was laying in bed with her, Amalia said that, you know, I need to tell you about me. There's a lot about me that I need to tell you. And she says, you know, not now. Let's just be. So I can only assume that since then and now, they've had a heart-to-heart, and she's maybe told Penance more about her and where she's from. Also because when she mentions, like, that whole conversation from the start of this episode, you know, I'm not from here, and all of that stuff, Penance never questions it. The same way Horatio never really questions when she says weird stuff like that. So I can only assume that, yeah, they know at least a certain degree of where she's from and who she is. That's what I took from the end there.
Yeah, they've got a lot more knowledge than I thought they'd have. In fact, it looks like the characters know way more than the audience does. I liked the idea, actually, of all the touched coming together and bonding from a place of not knowing, like, what mysterious forces they're dealing with, but it looks like Amalia's kind of in on it. I think she has some inside information. And who's to say who else has inside information? And then the message to Amalia from the song, by the way, was very warm and affectionate. Dare I say motherly, to kind of tie in that Lucy conversation. So my question would be, do you think Amalia is alien altogether? Do you think she had a life with a bakery and a husband and it just didn't work out? Or, like, what drove her to jumping off that ledge? That's my question.
I think I mentioned before when we discussed it, I wasn't sure whether this is her, like the original Amalia, or whether she did in fact die in the water and the bit of light that went into it is like another being that took over her body, and then that gives us the whole "this isn't my face" and all of that kind of things. Because we don't really know anything about her past on Earth apart from, this husband with an abuse thing, and that she knows Malady and Horatio from, we presume, an insane asylum. But we still don't particularly know the time frame of all that and everything that went on. So I think there's definite possibilities for what happened. But even if she's from another planet or whatever, if she's dumped here even when she was a kid or whatever, like Superman, baby comes to Earth and lives a human life, she's unsure of what her mission is because of whatever reason, and just decides to live a regular human life, or as regular as she can.
And when she's having that conversation with Lucy, and Lucy mentions how just horrible her condition is and what repercussions it had for her son, I think Amalia mentions this wasn't the way it was supposed to be. So I'm wondering if maybe it was a concerted effort by whoever was piloting that spaceship to spread power to the people who don't have power in the seat of power, which is the United Kingdom in that time period. And maybe it kind of went awry for some reason. But it definitely looks like whatever that glowing thing is, it's inside the city, and so is the Dr. Edmund Haig in his subterranean torture labyrinth, which is where they presumably need to go.
Like the whole episode, like you said, it had a completely different feel to the other 3 episodes. It was far less action, it was more story and character based, and then you have this huge thing happen at the end and just the credits, and you're just like, oh, it was a very one of those things that leaves you, it's like a cliffhanger, but it's not like a major thing that's happening right there. But just, I'm really, really can't wait for the last 2 episodes in like the first half of the season. It's going to be exciting, I think. Let's go to some letters from our listeners. So it's time to check in with our listeners and crack open the Nevers mailbox. If you have a question, comment or theory that you'd like to share with us, tweet it to us at theneverspodcast without an A, or send us an email at theneverspodcast@gmail.com and we'll read it on an upcoming episode. So, friend of the pod, Thorius Unlimited on Twitter, tweeted to us and said, I'm calling it Lavinia is the one who had Mary killed. It had to be someone with enough influence to get the Gatling gun arm guy released from jail, and Massen is too obvious.
Yeah, I agree with you, Thorius Unlimited. I think you're right.
Yeah, I also think that it's probably Lavinia. I think that she had the information and it seemed too perfect that it wasn't her.
And then she went to the funeral and sang. Okay, so we'll see about that. The killer will be revealed. Here's a letter from Ken Ream. He writes, Hello, I just have to comment on something I think is obvious, but you missed it entirely. On your review of the first episode, you went on for a bit about the symbolism of the little girl that fell down apparently dead when she was touched by the falling particles and the sudden simultaneous awakening of Amalia following her suicide attempt. I think you missed the boat by saying it was symbolic. Number 1, there were no other instances shown or mentioned about the particles killing anyone. Number 2, remember Amalia's line of, "It's not my face." And number 3, remember Amalia on the floor among the children hiding and shaking like a scared, overwhelmed little girl. My conclusion is Amalia's suicide attempt was successful. Her body is now occupied by the spirit, soul, or consciousness of the little girl who fell dead when they were both touched by the particles. This is kind of similar to your theory. Thanks, Ken, for the letter. I think episode 4 proved both of us wrong. Nevertheless, I would say that to your theory, the only question I would ask is, I don't think Amalia's behavior really strikes me as that of a child. She's more of like a jaded detective from a film noir. But that's an interesting idea. I think maybe you might be right in the sense that the suicide attempt was successful, but the subsequent possession of her was from the particle. maybe it was from, like you were saying, Laura, from some entity that possessed her body and is now living in it in a completely alien world.
Yeah, and I'm also with you, I think, what we was mentioning at the start, that I think we missed this in the last episode, right? That when they're installing the telephone wires and they go down into the dungeon-looking area of his manor, and there's something in one of those cells, and my first thought at that moment was, I wonder if his little girl didn't die, but she turned into some beast or monster, and that's her turn. And of course, someone of his stature would want to cover that up, and they would say that she died, and they would throw her into a cell, I guess, because, you're not going to want to kill her or get rid of her some other how, because it's still your daughter, but you can't have, he doesn't want a touched, person as a daughter or as part of his family in his position, and especially if she's turned into some kind of beast, he definitely doesn't want that. So I think that's where I was going after that episode. But yeah, I think we completely kind of missed that part last week.
Yeah, and I know you haven't seen Game of Thrones, but it reminds me of the Stannis Baratheon thing, where he was so ashamed of his daughter's condition that he put her in a dungeon and isolated her from everybody else. Anyways, an HBO parallel comparison.
So Marcelo Inostroza on Twitter says, do you think the tone of the show is going to change dramatically after the initial first 6 episodes, since Joss Whedon will no longer be there, or do you think the team will press on in the show and the show won't suffer in quality? If the cast and the crew and the writers and everyone else, it's the same cast and crew, I can't see it changing too dramatically. The writers, if everybody else is still on board, I think they've got such a good thing. I think it would be really hard to ruin it.
Yeah, I think they're going to introduce vampires. I don't know for sure, but that's what I heard. Just what I heard.
We can always hope. I hope it's going to be just as good. So, an email from Jen. Hi, wonderful show and appreciate you taking our questions. I was wondering how the show decided which unique talent each character had. They are so incredible to watch and experience. Thanks, Jen Caden.
If I was to guess, I would think that they want the powers to be visually, emotionally, and lyrically diverse. Like, for example, Primrose is so visually interesting because she's so tall, and then you have Penance, who kind of brings the steampunk mise-en-scène with all the motor cars and the cool electric things. And then Lucy is obviously the heartbreaking, the rogue, can't touch anyone, isolated character. And then you have characters like Myrtle and Malady who add the lyrical dynamism to it. So I think it's just interesting to have a diverse array of powers that you can go places with story-wise, and just as an audience that you want to see on the screen.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the most important thing probably is story. Like, I think when you're putting together all of these characters, especially when it's, action and it's sci-fi, a lot of time you need something to get from A to B. And if it's that person, can do a particular thing, then that's going to lead you there. And as they keep introducing more and more characters, and perhaps the other people in the orphanage, like the younger ones and that, might start getting more involved, it'll be interesting to see what turns they have and how they're going to help as the story goes on. So this last one's from Michael Buckhalter. Great job so far, guys. I like your format of discussion. Thank you, Michael. I never thought about Amalia being an alien. Here's my 2 cents. So I think the victim found in the sewers was put there by Amalia. They mentioned her face not being eaten by rats, and Amalia says, "It's not my face," to the Beggar King. I think she might have been dead when she was touched, and now she has to stay alive by using skin somehow. I think it will be revealed that Amalia abused her husband and laments his death. I think it's Massen's daughter in the dungeon, and she's not really dead. I think only the touch can do the mining on the part of the ship at the site. I agree, sir, that the Nazi-esque Doctor is comically evil, but also comically American. I think Malady and Amalia will team up. I think the Beggar King is controlled by Massen. It may have been in a trailer. Finally, I think it's going to be fantastic when Primrose fights, because that's what you do with the meekest characters, and especially what you do with characters that are giants. Well spoken on the subject of allegations against Whedon, guys. My best wishes for your continued success. Feel free to edit any part of this, Michael. Thank you. So, yeah, let's... So the first one, yeah. So the sewer victim was Amalia. I don't think so, personally. What do you think?
I think, Michael, you watched Game of Thrones and another comparison with the faceless people using the faces. I don't think... I wouldn't... I mean, that would be pretty cold of Amalia to do. And I'm not sure if you can sustain a show where the hero steals faces. But you never know.
You never know.
Yeah, you never know. It could very well be true.
So I like this one. I think it would be revealed that Amalia abused her husband and laments his death. So obviously, Mundy mentioned that it was an abusive relationship, I think. He doesn't necessarily say which side. And I think we even did it. We just assumed that it was the husband.
I will say one thing to you, Michael. I really appreciate you setting all of these ideas, because these ideas are something that I never would have thought of. Like my head just wouldn't have gone there with the rat eating the face and Amalia using skin somehow. And I think that's the benefit of conversation. Like that's the fruits of dialogue. Is this ideological exchange kind of gives me an opportunity to think differently and hear different ideas, and so I appreciate that at the very least. And then as far as Amalia possibly being the abusive one in the relationship, I think that holds some water from what we've seen of her behavior. It can be reckless. She clearly is okay with starting bar fights quite liberally, smashing glasses in people's faces. So I pity the fate of her poor husband. Or maybe she didn't even have a husband and that story is a facade. And if it did, she didn't have any recollection of it. If the theory is true that she's being possessed by a different entity altogether.
So Michael agrees with us about what we just discussed about Massen's daughter. So it's not just us. Or I think only the touch can do the mining. Oh, this one I really liked. I think only the touch can do the mining on the part of the ship at the site. So this is interesting. This would give reason to why Lavinia, if she is somewhere deep down good, right, and fighting for the touched cause, and needs to get this big blue thing up and running and working for whatever reason, is it only people that have been touched and are full of this energy, possibly, that can get near it and work with it? Because then that would give her reason for doing what she's doing. Still doing it in a terrible way, obviously. But, yeah, I found this really interesting and I hadn't thought about it.
Yeah, without that being true, it would be a little needlessly cruel to vegetate all those people. But I feel like you guys are maybe. I'm going to accuse you, Laura. I feel like you're really holding on to a shred of goodness in Lavinia. I don't know about that.
I don't know. I feel like why I think there's more to her. I do. I still think there's more to her.
Yeah, I think she should be Malady's roommate. I think she should be down there too.
Oh. Agrees that the Nazi-esque Doctor is comically evil, but also comically American. Yeah, he's very over the top, isn't he? He's definitely like a character, like the biggest character of this show. And yeah, we haven't seen that much of him yet, so I'm hoping that we'll see more of him and what's going on underground, like the next couple episodes.
Yeah, all the other characters, they have like shades of gray, and he's just kind of a cartoon. He's comically evil. Maybe they'll add some depth to him as we go forward. Maybe he'll become a little more compelling. That's to be seen.
So I think Malady and Amalia will team up. I think this is highly likely. Obviously, they have shared experiences from the past. She's in prison now, but it's likely that we're going to get to a point where something needs to be done, and it can only be done with Amalia and Malady because they have some connection to the big blue thing, or, you know, especially if they've been in prison now, you know, where are we going to go? I think that's the way it's going to go. I don't know. Is she beyond saving? If you put everything that's happened to her and down to like mental illness as such, is it fair to completely take her life away if it's possible to reform her instead?
Well, she could ultimately play her role like a Gollum kind of character. Without Gollum, the ring wouldn't have, you know, fallen into Mount Doom. So she might have an important role to play. And then going back to the conversation between Bonfire Annie and Dr. Horatio, is there really that much of a difference between Malady and Amalia? Maybe they are mirror reflections of each other, like Batman and the Joker. Maybe there's kind of a you know, we're not too different, you and I, kind of thing.
Michael also thinks that the Beggar King is controlled by Massen. Like I was saying, at the minute, it's like really hard to tell. I didn't break into it too much with all the... I will, I think, at the end. I need to come back to everything that happened with Lucy in all the episodes that brings you back to why she... how you can see that she's working behind the scenes throughout the episodes. But it's... For one instance, at the party, Lucy sends her home early after Augie upsets her. And you think, oh, that's nice. You know, she's being motherly, she's being nice. But upon leaving and heading to home on her own, she gets kidnapped. Okay, so then I'm questioning, well, Lucy did that. And it was planned. But now if Lucy's working for Massen, but she was kidnapped and taken to Malady. So, is everyone working together? Is Massen, Bidlow, and Malady in some respect, are they all kind of like I said, part of this big web? I'm still kind of confused who's working for who and who's in each other's pockets and that.
I don't think Lucy would do that to Penance. The way she sacrificed her escape by going back for the pin makes me kind of believe in her, and it wouldn't really make sense that Lucy is working with Massen and it's Malady who gets the jump on Penance. Who knows, you know, alliances shift, they're fluid. The Beggar King was aligned with Amalia, and then they're enemies, and then they're okay again in episode 4. Who really knows? But like as far as the Beggar King, I think it would be really interesting if he was working for Massen in terms of social commentary. If this criminal organization that's peddling opium and violence was being sponsored by the state, like by England, it would pay off the Augustus's line. I think it was the barbarity of the well-off, and there's a remarkable similarity between the scenes of the Beggar King scolding his workers who were handling the opium, and Lord Massen scolding his dock workers who were handling the bombs.
So Michael's last point is that he thinks it's going to be great when Primrose fights. I don't know. I don't fucking see her in a fight. Or she'd be in the fight where, like, she'd accidentally end up in the middle of a fight and not really... Because I can't imagine her hurting anybody. You know, she's just this young girl, very, very sweet. And I guess you're right, you know, sometimes the meekest characters can end up being kind of the most deadly and the strongest, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we'll see her in a fight. I hope not, because even though she's giant and probably very, very strong, yeah, she's still a child, and I'd want to protect her and not ever let her get anywhere near a fight.
Yeah, and what's her name? Lavinia calls Primrose the tiger in the first episode, or the second episode.
She does, yeah.
So people will clearly see her stature as a threat, and they will see her as a weapon, but just her character isn't that. So if she does fight, I think it would be more to protect someone she cares about, as opposed to cause damage.
Yeah.
Gentle giant.
Mm-hmm. So, what are your final thoughts?
The plot is going somewhere.
It's definitely going somewhere.
That's not a descriptive thing to say. I like. It's an enjoyable show so far. I'm a little less enthused with this episode as I was with the opening 2 episodes that I thought were just, out of the gate, just blew my mind. This one made it a little more conventional sci-fi. It feels like it's now trotting a path that's been well trod. But nevertheless, it's a path that I would want to walk. It's an enjoyable show. It's got some sci-fi elements that are becoming more visible, and the relationships are really the thing that'll probably keep me coming back. I want to see what happens between these characters, the will they, won't they, the relationship, the friendships, the alliances, the enemies, what happens to Malady. Overall, I'd say maybe on a scale from 1 to 10, maybe like a 7.
So I've still really enjoyed it. I like having something different kind of every episode. So a lot of TV shows, and especially the past Whedon shows, it's kind of like a formula each episode. There's a big bad or something that happens and everything's resolved at the end of the episode, and then you move on. And you have the character arcs and the story arcs that go throughout the seasons. And a lot of TV is the same, but every episode has this formula from start to finish. But so far, we haven't had that. Every episode's been kind of different. And it's like this one was very just, here's all of these interrogations and, we're finding out some stuff. But yeah, there's nothing that happens every episode. Because this could have very easily been every episode they go and find someone who's touched and they bring them back to the orphanage and something happens among that. And do you know what I mean? It could have been a very kind of boring, repetitive show. And so far, in at least these 4 episodes, it's kind of kept you on your toes a bit and been unpredictable. Like I said,
at least they have a goal now. They have a goal or something they're trying to go. They have to find the glowing orb thing.
Yeah, I think the next 2 episodes, because they're going to take a break after, the next 2 episodes I think are going to be full on action, kind of trying to get to the point, and we'll have some kind of knowledge about what's going on as a whole. We've just left off where you're thinking Amalia is going to now tell at least the adults in the closed group what's kind of her deal. And then they're going to launch from being this orphanage that just takes in touch to having to kind of form, in essence, some kind of supergroup that's going to have to try and investigate and fight possibly a war. Touching on that, I just got to throw it in there, I loved Amalia's dress in this episode. It had like a 2-piece top where it was almost like a bird shape showing through. I don't know if that's like symbolic of anything, but for me it looked like a really badass Victorian supersuit. She was like going around trying to find out all this information, ended up in a fight with Lucy, and it was just, I thought it was fantastic. She looked, the dress was amazing. I thought the costume was really great. So yeah, just leaning into that. Are they going to form this super troupe that's going to go out and actually have to start kind of working together? Because we haven't seen that yet. We've seen like a couple of them at a time going out and doing things, but if they're going to end up in a war, then they're going to have to really band together and actually, I guess, fight for their, whatever it is, this big blue thing and alien planet. We don't know yet, but it'll be interesting to see. I'm excited. But yeah, I can understand how people might not be as enthused by this episode because it was very different to the first couple.
That should be the title of this podcast. We don't know.
We don't know what's going on. We got some ideas, but we're not sure. So that'll do for this episode of the podcast. If you enjoyed the Nevered podcast, we would, of course, like it if you left us a positive review. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Amazon Music Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever else you stream your podcasts. For more Nevers-related content, you can find us on the web at hbothenevers.com, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at hbothenevers and at the Nevers Podcast, and also at the Nevers Podcast without an A. Comments or questions can be sent to theneverspodcast at gmail.com. Please also rate and review our podcast and help us reach more listeners. So, that's all for today's episode. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Chirag, for joining me today, sharing your thoughts on the 4th episode. So, where can we find you online, Chirag?
You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me in a politician's dungeon. I'll be everywhere. Where can people find you, Laura?
You can find me at Instagram, LauraJP1721. And until next week, this has been the Nevers Podcast. Bye. Or you can find me just on my Instagram at Laura172. No, wait, I did that wrong. I don't use it that often, do you know what I mean?
This episode of the Nevers Podcast was written, produced, and edited by Matthew Yamanashi at Culture Inject Studios. The intro and outro music was produced by Guilherme Moraes. We are more than just a podcast. We're a fan community. You can keep up to date on the Nevers and chat with other fans by visiting hbothenevers.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Just search HBO The Nevers, all one word, and click that follow button. The Nevers Podcast is not endorsed by Mutant Enemy, Warner Media Entertainment, or any of its subsidiaries, including Home Box Office, HBO, and is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. The Nevers and all names, pictures, and audio clips are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of their respective copyright holders.